and welcome to episode 4. We're on 4 now of our summer run through of season 2 of The Final Glass. This season, we are tackling some history movies, and of course, our entire, aura is built on the Oscar Wilde quote.
After the first glass, you see things as you want them to be. After the second glass, you see things as they are not. And only after the final glass, you see things as they really are. And that
is the worst thing of all.
Indeed.
Because none of us are prepared for what we really look like when we wake up in the morning.
Exactly.
Among other horrible, horrible situations. And I'm Ruthie.
I'm Jacob.
And this is us kind of working out a lot of our married couple issues as well, because we don't tend to align on a lot of views.
Using alcohol.
Using alcohol, which can be both a crutch in a bad and a good way.
Yes.
I mean, crutch can be either. Along the way, we might be joined by one or both of our cats, both of whom have strong opinions on various things, and so you may hear from them as well. And before we move forward talking about today's movie, let's talk about this whole ensemble / getup.
So my whole getup. So it's actually pretty simple and unfortunately boring, but I had laser eye surgery, and so now when I look into really bright studio lights like we've got all around here, I get these star-shaped patterns, which are very distracting. Makes it difficult to drive at night, but it makes it really difficult to sit for an hour and drink alcohol, enjoying it, and talking about history or movies. So, such is life. You want me in front of the camera, you got to deal with my eye issues.
Well, by you mean me.
Yes.
Okay. So today we are going to discuss one of my husband's favorite movies. It is not one of my favorite movies.
Zulu.
Yes, Zulu.
One of the best movies ever made.
The big time appearance of Michael Caine, and he is wonderful.
Yes.
I love Michael. I do love me some Michael Caine.
Yes.
Not one of my favorite movies. It has nothing to do with the movie and everything to do with Ruthie.
Yes.
I can independently look at the movie and say, this is wonderful, this is great, this was fantastic, and also be like, I don't want to sit through it again. But that's a Ruthie problem, not a movie problem.
So Zulu tells the history of the end of the battle.
Yes, but before we get into the movie, we should talk about our booze.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll go first. I'm back to one of my most beloved combinations, not the platonic ideal of a Ruthie drink, which would be Tanqueray Rangpur with bitter lemon. Best drink ever. But this is a good drink, and it is a rum liqueur. This is one I haven't tried before, Bagheera Kokorum. So this is going to be a new one that I'm trying for the first time.
Sounds like it should be in the Jungle Book.
It does, but we're not reviewing Kim.
That's true.
And then with my standby pineapple juice, I do love a good pineapple juice. So that's what I'm having.
So in honor of the British officers that fought at Rorke's Drift, I'm going to be sampling several of the whiskeys that they most likely drank. All of these distilleries were open before the battle, and all of these, whiskey being a very popular drink for the British Army, they would have...
I would like to point out that I am drinking the British Navy drink, so
true.
Rum.
That's true, rum.
I would like to avoid sodomy on the lash.
That might have to be edited out. Or it might not. Depends on how the rest of these glasses go.
I haven't even started drinking yet, but go ahead.
So my first one is going to be Jameson Irish whiskey. Now, one may ask, why, when this is a Welsh regiment that fought this battle, would we be drinking some Irish whiskeys? Well, the background of most of the officers who both led the regiment and who were there in the Royal Engineers is generally Irish. And that was very popular in the British Army at the time, but the Irish folks found it a good way to be able to get out of Ireland and to see the world and to earn a little bit of extra money. So a lot of these folks where in addition, the Welsh regiment was mostly Welsh, but the Irish were their officers.
And this is our bucket O Jameson.
It is indeed.
Basically, this is like you can't even pour it without a, what's this called? A thing holding
cradle.
it steady. Yeah, you can't. This is for when you're serious.
Yes, it's an emergency stash, but I decided to break it open for this movie. So the first one will be the baseline Jameson.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, this is very smooth, very coconutty. I don't think that's smooth.
It's not smooth, but
does it get the job done?
Like a lot of things in the British Army, it gets the job done.
Job done.
It's like the Royal Engineers themselves.
This is very smooth, and I'm actually going to recommend this to a few nieces and nephews who are above the appropriate age for drinking. I think our children are beyond the rum stage of their life.
Let me rinse out this glass a little bit, so the next one will be.
Oh, you really you shot that back.
Mm.
Okay, Zulu, the movie. So the movie itself was based on the Battle of Rorke's Drift, which followed the Battle of Ishanawana.
Yep.
We're going to be rather a bit of know-it-alls about this because we've been to both battlefields multiple times. Fantastic visit, I have to say, in different ways for each battlefield. And there are some incredibly knowledgeable guides that you can get when you go there. So the battle was 1879.
Yes.
1879, part of the Anglo-Zulu War. And the movie itself was made in 1964. So one of the very interesting things about the movie was it was actually an American who directed it.
But who was blacklisted in Hollywood.
Yes.
And it could only work in the UK.
In the UK. And actually, this wasn't too terribly unusual for blacklisted. He was blacklisted as a screenwriter, I believe. So, and Michael Caine later said that he owed his being hired for the role to the fact that it was an American directing it, because a British director would have never hired a commoner to play the role that he played. And thank goodness someone did, because again, big Michael Caine fan.
Yeah.
Big Michael Caine fan here. I really am.
So the movie covers the end of the Battle of Ishanawana. About maybe a third of the movie comes from the run-up to the Battle of Rorke's Drift, and then it covers the entire Battle of Rorke's Drift through to the end, and to a little bit of what happens afterwards. So the scope of the movie is actually very narrow. It covers less than 48 hours of time.
I think it's a little more than 48 hours.
It's not the end of the battle.
Yeah,
the entire battle lasted less than 24 hours.
Yeah, but I mean from the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, from the beginning of the movie. Ishanawana and then Rorke's Drift was immediately.
It was, but I thought that, okay, so I'm wrong about this, and that occasionally does happen.
It's less than 2 days worth of time.
Okay. One of the big things that impressed me was that the person playing King Cetshwayo in the movie was actually a great-grandson. And that he is a dead ringer for the king.
Yeah. And a lot.
Dead ringer.
Yeah. And there's a great deal of authenticity in the Zulu portion of the battle, where a lot of the people that participated, a lot of the extras participated, were genuine Zulu warriors. And they had much less experience with acting than they did with being Zulus. And so they had to be taught to act. It's kind of the opposite, whereas normally you take an actor and you teach them how to be a British soldier. In this case, you took Zulus and you had to teach them how to act.
And I have to say, we had the absolute privilege to spend quite a few years living in a few different African countries, and including South Africa. And so there were some of the things that they showed. There's a very big, especially when your children are there in school, there's a very big push to make sure that the kids, and parents kind of get dragged along, understand the local cultures. We lived in KwaZulu-Natal, which means that Zulu was everywhere. In fact, we ran into King Goodwill Ethekwini at a few different places, which was like, for us, it was like amazing. We never met him. met him. We were never introduced to him, but we did have the good luck to be in the same place as him. And I think a lot of people who live in that area are like, yeah, so what? So do we. It's like when we lived in Zambia meeting Kenneth Kaunda. Everybody's like, yeah, I met him too. What's the big deal?
But the king would wear traditional Zulu dress.
Yeah. So, yes. And that was, anyway, as I was saying, this was something that we were exposed to. And so for me, it's one of the highlights of the movie is watching that. And in person, it is every bit as epic to see some of these performances, these dances, these traditional cultural things. It's every bit as epic to see it in person as it is in the movie. Movies often make things look bigger than they are.
Mhm.
But to me, those things were all so, like, exciting is the wrong word. Fascinating.
So
Fascinating.
the movie was shot in, we'll talk a little bit about the apartheid era restrictions in a second, but the movie was shot in two places. So the hospital scene was shot on a soundstage in the UK, and that was to save expense, but also because the fire effects were real.
Mhm.
And so it was difficult to set up those kind of effects without endangering the actors outside of a soundstage environment where everything is controlled. But the outside battle scenes, that's inside the hospital, which was a major portion of the battle, outside the hospital was shot almost entirely on location in South Africa.
And that is, I mean, it was shot on location. So what you're seeing is what it really looks like. And one thing I'll say about South Africa is it is probably one of the most epic places I have ever been. Everything natural in South Africa is huge. It's huge. So when you're in the Drakensberg or, in these areas and you see these mountains, you really do feel like an ant next to them. It is absolutely huge on a scale that I think in a lot of places where people live, they're not going to be able to comprehend unless you see it in person.
So both the battle and the movie take place at the exact border between Natal, which was a British colonial holding, and Zululand. And if you'll notice now, the name
At the time.
now the name of the place is KwaZulu-Natal.
Right.
So those two have been merged together. But at the time, they were on a border of at a tremendous area of impending conflict.
Yes,
shall we
and
say.
actually Natal itself had been Zulu previously under King Shaka, and Shaka was like, sure, so what Shaka did was basically wipe out everybody who wasn't Zulu
Yeah.
in that area. And this was a time Shaka was in charge in the 1820s. It was called the Mfukane. It was a huge time of upheaval. So this was 60 years before the Battle of Rorke's Drift. And so it was Shaka who okayed British settlers coming into Natal.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the background on how the British got to that area to start with.
Yeah. So the British invasion column into Zululand came right through Rorke's Drift.
Yes.
Now, just a quick point about Rorke's Drift. So it was originally a Boer word. Drift is a Boer word. A Boer were the South African
The kind of Dutch.
the
Dutch
settlers.
The Dutch.
Yeah.
I would like they evolved from Dutch settlers, maybe.
So they were the Dutch settlers had been their ancestors, but the Boers were a fiercely independent people, and Boers were fiercely. My wife can't not correct me. So the Boers were fiercely independent people who established a lot of the names for these areas, for these trading posts, for these landmarks. And so what they called a fording area was a drift. So when the Brits came along and they converted to English, they just said, we'll call it a drift.
Yeah.
And they established...
But they did that with a lot of native names as well.
A lot of native names. And then they established a kind of a missionary post, a bit of a trading post, and a supply area there for the British Army. Mm-hmm. And so in the movie, it doesn't show this, but this is the run-up to the movie, where the army crosses at Rorke's Drift, the central column, and heads into the mountains into the area right in the foothills, just short of the mountains, in order to engage against the Zulus.
Yeah.
So they've got a column of 1,400 men Unbeknownst to them, the Zulus are about 80,000 strong. About 20,000 of them, plus reserves, are waiting in, basically, they're waiting to lay a trap for the Brits as soon as the Brits come across and attack them.
And they had a particular formation that they used, and they actually do discuss that in the movie.
The classical attack of the Zulus is in the shape of a fighting bull buffalo like this. The head, the horns, and the loins.
So the Zulu army was arranged into what appeared to be a set of cattle horns and a body. So the main body would rush forward and attack and then immediately retreat, drawing the enemy in, and the horns would come across. Now, all of these warriors were armed with traditional weapons: cowhide shields, which are not bulletproof, short spears, which could be used for throwing or hand-to-hand combat, and basically cudgels.
And one of our guides, one of the things we've been there, I don't know, gosh, 4 times, I think. And each time we had one guide twice, but the other time, so we had 3 different guides. And what each of our guides said that is very fascinating and doesn't get talked about quite very often outside of the South African history area is that people come up with all of these reasons why the Zulus maybe won, things that were wrong with the British Army, whatever. But maybe, and the thing that people aren't talking about is they actually were pretty good. They knew what they were doing. They knew the landscape better than the Brits, for sure. And they planned it very well.
Yeah.
And I think that is a valid thing that needs to be talked about more. Everybody's looking for what was wrong with the Brits. Why did the Brits lose? Well, because the Zulu in that particular battle at Ishanawana, they were better.
Yeah. So the attack, so also the Zulu traveled light with only pretty much the equipment on their backs. Now, the disadvantage to that are pretty obvious. You don't have any water, you don't have any food. You often have to raid your own people in order to get supplies. And with this massive army of more than 20,000 troops, that proved to be quite a challenge.
But they also knew the area in a way the Brits did not.
And they could move at a pace that the British would find staggering. The British went in heavy. They went in with all of their supplies. They went in with modern guns. They went in with lots of horses, lots of feed, lots of tents. And so their movement was very slow. And when they finally set up outside of a fortified area, outside of Rorke's Drift at the camp at Ishanawana, they were just overwhelmed by these quickly moving Zulus.
Right.
So the Brits managed to inflict a lot of casualties at Ishanawana on the Zulus while they managed to maintain their firing lines. But as soon as those firing lines broke down and the Zulus broke into the camp, there were very few survivors.
It was done. Yeah, it was done. And again, if you do go to Ishanawana Rorke's Drift and do the tour, which we highly recommend, watch the movie, then go on the tour. These guides are fantastic, and they explain every little detail about this to you. Now, the one thing about Ishanawana I will say is that the official monument that is there, so that is incorrectly done, and the guides will also point that out to you.
Yeah, but we won't dwell too much on
we
that.
are not going to dwell on that. The rest of it, it's just magnificent. It's got cairns of white stones where bodies fell.
Yeah.
It is, and it's this huge vista view. We'll put some pictures up. Vista/view. I understand that's the same word. And we'll put some pictures up so that you can kind of see first, what it looks like from a first person. But this was a momentous battle. It was a huge loss for the British, both in numbers and mentally. Because they had to process, hey, these Zulu warriors that we call savages kicked our ass.
Yeah.
They were, and of course, again, this is where it starts. We don't want to admit they were better. There must be some other reason, because the British colonial army cannot be faced by a better local force. But
And so we have the loss at Ishanawana followed by the triumph at Rorke's Drift.
exactly.
So the survivors,
Which is not to downplay what happened at Rorke's Drift.
Yeah.
But you must have that for British morale.
yes, the few survivors that there are, and the column that was detached from the British main force who's returning now, comes back around toward Rorke's Drift. So rather than reinforcing the small element at Rorke's Drift of less than 150 troops, a quarter of whom are sick and in hospital. Rather than do that, they march onward and continue their retreat. So the officers at Rorke's Drift often find themselves waving and hearing shouts of "the Zulus are coming," and then the horses ride away. So only one Natal native regiment lieutenant, Swiss, stayed. He was a Swiss citizen, kind of, who was with the Netherlanders. It's complicated, but he stayed, and he's the one who provided the intelligence to the British on how the Zulus would attack them. And he had tremendous respect for the Zulus, which wasn't true of Chelmsford in his initial foray.
Which is part of the problem at Ishanawana.
And this is where the movie really takes off, where the retreating forces are back away from Rorke's Drift and leave it to stand on its own against a massive Zulu army coming. So they had no idea how many were coming, but we'll discuss that after the second class.
Which I have preloaded.
So this is from the Cardew Distillery, which is in Scotland, a distillery that would have been around long before the birth of...
Is it peaty?
It is not.
Actually, this smells like honey.
It does have notes of honey.
Oh, well, see. This smells like honey.
And you
like thick honey.
Never drink whiskey from a dry glass. I'll add a little water.
And I'll say to the queen. To the king.
To the king.
And queen, because I kind of like her.
Much better. Ooh.
I don't know if I like rum because I like rum, or if I like rum because I grew up on an island and I'm genetically predisposed to. But anyway, I love this rum. This is actually really, really good.
Yeah.
So, can I make a quick note? There is a missionary in the movie, Otto Witt.
Yes.
And his daughter, that was played with a little bit.
Yeah.
He was shown in the movie as far more pacifist than he was. He actually was all for, protecting, I guess, what he saw. And he also, it wasn't just his daughter, his whole family was at a farmstead, 20 kilometers from Worcester, something like that.
He stayed to provide as much information on Cheshwayo's army as he could. And then about an hour before the Zulu main body hit Rorke's Drift,
he went to take care of his family, which...
He retreated
but not
his homestead and his family.
But that was not, I don't think you could call it, he didn't retreat in cowardice or anything.
Yeah, he did not retreat in cowardice. He went to defend what was his, and the British supported him doing that.
Yes. And so one thing I think the filmmakers get a lot of crap for changing some of these people's stories. However, I think that some of these stories, it changed the story of the person, but it created kind of like a truthiness for the larger picture. Because there were people like Otto Witt as he was portrayed in the movie. And anything that was being done at the time in Rorke's Drift by the British Army, it was against the backdrop of all of these different sorts of things. So even though there may not have been someone like that, there were people like that. And that was something that was affecting both sides. So you had to show that somehow without making the movie too much and too boring. So my thought on that.
So one of the other central conflicts that really doesn't happen is the class conflict between the officers at the center. One working class engineer and one a kind of noble infantryman, career military. Both of the men got along fairly well. It also shows that there seems to be a very small difference in rank between the two, and the difference in rank was actually several years. So there would have been no conflict between the way that in the command structure.
Are you questioning my right to command?
Oh, not your right, old boy. Never mind. We can cooperate.
So the other piece is the general ages of the actors versus the general ages of the participants of the battle.
But this is a normal Hollywood thing that continues on today. One only need watch 90210 to get the same effect.
So the actors were in their 30s to 50s. The participants of the battle were in their teens and early 20s. With the exception of the officers.
90210.
We're a little older, exactly. So these tremendous acts of bravery were done by men who were just out of childhood. So they stood against,
By our measure.
by our measure, yeah. So they stood against a force of thousands for a long time until they were relieved. They didn't quit their posts, and they fought until the victory was assured.
Yes. Yeah. And I have to say, so we've been to like I said, we've been to this museum several times. It is beautifully done, and not in a way that, like, it hasn't been updated to be all techie the way a lot of museums are now. I mean, they're still using mannequins and things like that. However, the way that they put it together really gives you the feeling, I think, in my opinion. And so we had one part, like, there's the one that I remember most vividly is you walk from one room to another, and you see the hole in the wall that was dug for them to get through, and they have a mannequin through it.
No, don't it's me! Oh, come on, get through, you bloody Englishman.
They were very careful about using correct weaponry, correct uniforms. And my son, this lives on in our family lore. The first time we visited, my son was like, oh, he saw, I think was it the guy coming through the wall?
Yeah.
And he was like, you asked him you were trying to
yeah.
trip him up, and you asked him what rifle that was. And he was like, oh, I know this.
Yeah. So it was, and a lot of the artifacts in the museum are the originals.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, and they have a fantastic, you know how the Brits love to put like diorama models together. It's a very upper class British pastime. And somebody did that for the Battle of Rorke's Drift. And it takes up a huge part of one room. And it is astounding to look at because it's so well done. And to me, it is almost more intimate. Not almost, I think it is more intimate than looking at computerized images that show you what was going on. This model is just, and I think we spent like almost an hour just at the model. Oh, this is where this happened. This is where that happened. Fantastic.
So one of the interesting points, coming back to the actual battle versus the movie, is one of the things that the movie says, which is inaccurate, is that Cheshwayo's troops moved on to attack Rorke's Drift in their victory. But
yes,
that wasn't accurate.
That was absolutely inaccurate. In fact, Cheshwayo did not want that to happen. He gave orders for that not to happen. And his nephew went off on
his half-brother.
His half-brother. Okay. Sorry, got family ties mixed up. Went herring off and decided to do it on his own. And this was not what Cheshwayo wanted.
So one of the Zulu traditions after a battle was called washing your spears, and that's where the warriors who had killed with their spears and still had the blood on them would present them to the king. So if you didn't kill anyone, you were in the second rank, you couldn't fight for whatever reason, you would stab a body and present your spear to the king. The reserve units, the reserve impis, the infantrymen of the Zulu reserves had no opportunity to do that. And so they thought, well, we've been unblooded. And they had marched all this time, they had mobilized, they had done all these feats of logistics in order to arrive at a place, and they couldn't even wash their spears. And so they made the decision, Cheshwayo's half-brother made the decision, that they were going to attack the British mission post, which seemed to be a very easy target for his men to have an ability to wash their spears and be considered true warriors.
And we should also say that there were family politics going on as well. Cheshwayo himself was actually a very strong leader. However, much like every other royal family, the people who were not in charge felt they would be better in charge. And so there was always this kind of back and forth fighting. And so that certainly played a role in his half-brother's behavior. And I'd like to take a little side thing. They didn't show this in the movie. One of the most fascinating ethnological, maybe anthropological sort of things that we learned on our visits was about the thorn tree. And
The
so
buffalo thorns.
yes, and one of the big misunderstandings between the Zulu and the Anglos was that after a battle, the Zulus, they couldn't take their dead with them. So they would cut their stomach open and then they would bury them. And then later there would be a thorn tree that would grow over them. And later they would come back and they would get the thorn tree. So the British thought that they were mutilating bodies. The Zulu were letting the spirits out.
Yeah.
The spirit couldn't leave unless you did that. So this was definitely a misunderstanding, and it was part of the brute kind of mythos that grew up around there. But in their beliefs, this was letting the spirit out, and you couldn't take the body home. So the thorn tree would be planted over there. Then you would come back later, take a piece of that, and then that brings their spirit home. Yeah. To whomever is, missing them.
But the Zulu definitely did loot bodies. The Zulu
Yes.
did take war trophies. The Zulu
Yes.
would cut off beards. That was one of their top.
Well, and I mean, like, this was not a nice war for anyone,
not a
right?
nice war.
This was not nice on any side. The British certainly had their share of things that they did as well.
Yeah.
So,
And we can't judge.
Taking, we can't say one side was more this than the other or anything from our position in the future. But what we can say is that particular thing, the thorn tree, which I thought was a really interesting side story. And I don't think they could have put it in the movie and made sense in any way. But I do think that it's a side story that should be discussed if you're discussing the movie. Mm-hmm. Because if you discuss the movie and then you read more, you're finding out, the desecration of bodies. But in this case, that was not desecration.
Yeah. But it was, there was looting. There was the standard war, and we can't.
It was war on both sides.
We can't sit back and judge them from the perch of our nice, safe
21st century.
Yeah, 21st century.
Comparatively.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Yeah, our standards.
Yeah.
So the Zulus arrive. So the first thing that the two officers do is they go by the book, and the Brits had an excellent colonial book for how to defend, how to attack, how to do everything. And the troops that went into Zululand had discarded that book. But the troops who were at Rorke's Drift, having an engineer, followed it exactly. So you build you basically build ramparts with whatever you have. You build an outdoor you build an outer cordon, you build an inner cordon, you fortify hard points, you post snipers at top positions, and that's exactly what they did. So
and they were able to hold them off.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the moral of the story. But the first Zulus that come in, another important piece is these Zulus had not eaten for days. They had not drunk water in some cases for days. Mm-hmm. And they were still able to mount what would be considered a suicidal attack against a mass group of rifles. Yeah. And they were mowed down by British fire en masse.
And kept coming.
So there's arguments about how many were in this reserve impi that came and attacked. We think it's between 2,000 and 4,000.
And they took tremendous casualties.
So there were at least 500 casualties of the Zulus during the battle. Mm-hmm. The Brits lost 17 men and 10 wounded. Mm-hmm. So there's another way to look at this. The battle is tremendously, and not to take away from the defenders of Rorke's Drift, but the battle is tremendously apocalyptic. And it shows the fire and all the risk that the men came under. And it shows the Zulus.
I think the movie shows us very...
Yeah, the movie shows it as the waves of Zulus coming again and again.
Again, we're spoiled now when it comes to war. We're used to a lot fewer people dying than ever before in history. First of all, because disease isn't the issue that it was every time up until recently. Like, we have penicillin now. We have... sanitation methods that they never had before in history. And so we just do not have the casualties that historically war brought about. And that's a good thing, but it does make us spoiled. Yeah. And so I don't want to. I'm not taking anything. They did a valiant job.
They did. They did a valiant defense.
They did a valiant defense.
I'm saying that the movie showed a little bit more drama than their.
I don't think that was more drama. I think that if anything, if I were in the middle of that situation, there would be a lot more drama. The Ruthie's drama would have been
So
a lot more intense.
So one of the interesting points, no matter how outnumbered they were, but the fact that they maintained fire discipline, and it tremendously shows the flexibility and bravery of the British Army, that they were able to set up firing lines. And this has about a 5-minute scene in the movie where they'll fire, the front row will drop, fire, the rear row will skip to in front of the front row, become the front row, drop, fire, while the rear row reloads, and they'll just advance that way.
Can I undo me tunic buttons now? Now,
A few meters at a time, each time, and just decimating the Zulu force throughout that.
It was more than decimating, because that's 1 in 10.
Yeah. So the casualties were either about 25% or maybe about 15% of the Zulu force.
Yeah, so it was more than decimating.
Yeah.
I mean, now, 'cause this is like the word literal now, right? Like nothing, we say literally when it's not literally, and now we're saying decimating when we mean annihilating.
We mean 15% instead of 10.
Yeah, or 25.
Or 25. So the combat was static in the beginning until the Zulus broke through, and then it was dynamic from the Zulus' perspective, but the Brits made it static again, and that's where they won again and again and again. So the very dramatic scene of the fire inside the hospital was very realistic, except for one thing. The main hero of the battle inside the hospital, Private Hooks, was not at all like he was portrayed.
Hey, what are you talking about? I'm sick. I'm excused duty.
What are you doing?
Oh, making a loophole, see?
He was portrayed as a malingerer, a drunk, someone who stopped fighting in order to try to drink some wine, who was a coward who showed some form of bravery occasionally, but most of all was a coward. And that was not at all how he was.
And his daughters left the screening.
Yeah, when they saw the movie,
as they should have. They were absolutely correct. I don't agree in portraying people badly when they weren't actually, and I don't agree with portraying them as they aren't, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Although I just did defend the.
So Private Hooks was a teetotaler, didn't drink at all, and he was a Methodist preacher in his spare time. And he was one of the few men that was in the hospital who was actually receiving more pay for good behavior, which is something very British. We assume that everyone's going to be an idiot, and then if you do well, we'll pay you a little bit more.
But you know what? Maybe there's something to that.
There might be something.
But then there'll be great inflation. It'll be like Harvard, where everybody will get extra pay, and you have to be really bad to not get it. I don't know.
So the Brits held their battle.
Just a second.
So as in the movie, the Brits held the hospital as long as they could. This was a hard point in the battle. They had dug out firing ports, they had smashed out windows, and they were using it to great effect to shoot the Zulus as they came. So the Zulus used lamp oil to set the hospital on fire, trying to kill all the defenders, and the defenders had to dig their way out while the Zulus fought their way in. So this was the loss of the hospital and the loss of the first rampart was what caused the British Army to in a very disciplined manner, collapse into the inner rampart.
Bugler! Return to this wall!
Which the Zulus were never able to penetrate. But it was textbook defense by the Brits, and it worked.
And if you're interested in this kind of battle, is absolutely, I think you should study the two of them together always.
Yeah.
Ishanawada and Rourke Strip. In any, like, I almost think that it's almost the same battle.
Yeah.
One's a continuation of the other. I am not a military historian, however, so. Yeah. But it is a great battle to study if that's something that you're interested in. And so to talk about the aftermath, should we do our third glass? Yes. See things as they really are.
So the thing that helps me see things as they really are is Red Label. Now, Johnny Walker will argue that Red Label is simply a flavor of whiskey. I would argue that it is quite terrible. But
And
This is-
yet here you are.
this is the original, but this would have been the original Johnny Walker.
But see, you're taking one for the team, and I will not take one for the team. I'm not drinking anything that doesn't make me happy.
Oh, it makes me happy. It just doesn't taste very good going down and might burn a hole in my stomach.
Cheers.
Cheers. Mmm. Ah.
So I think we should take a little, before we talk about the aftermath, which entails an awful lot of Victoria Crosses, I think we should talk about the song Men of Harlach.
Come on, sing!
So that is actually something an awful lot of warfighters to this day know. I don't know if they know it because they know it or if they know it from the movie and like it has created a
So the reason they know it is from the movie.
Okay, see, there we go.
Because the actual song is nothing like that.
Okay, well, you know.
So they used...
And there was no singing contest with the Zulu at the end.
There was no singing.
Yeah. However, it is a very dramatic moment, gives a truthiness kind of feel because the Zulu really did think that the defense that the British had mounted was valiant.
Yes. And they did walk away. They do
Mhm.
retreat with honor.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't break. They decided, okay, this tiny little settlement is not worth the battle. And they also did not know. They saw a column of cavalry coming, and they figured, well, this column's actually pretty large, but it wasn't. And so then they decided to quit the field and go back to Zululand.
Right.
So the song is a lot like the Kazakh national anthem as sung by Borat, which has been played inadvertently in a lot of places when the Kazakh national teams have played.
It was one place.
That was a couple.
It was one place.
It played at a rodeo as well. So,
But that was on purpose.
Perhaps on purpose.
That was on
perhaps not.
purpose, and that was for Sacha Baron Cohen's
It's a great-
movie. Yeah, I know. We're not
Great
even
movie.
gonna
But that's
trying to be
things-
accurate
But
here.
that's things as they really are.
Yes,
The
things as
Kazakh-
they really
The
are.
Kazakh national anthem.
So, but and that was also not the actual song. The regiment's it's the regiment's song, right?
The
That was not the actual song at that time. Did become later, before the movie, which is maybe how they kind of assumed it was the song then, or maybe I don't know. I wasn't there, and I didn't look it up.
And the truth of the names of the regiments and the Victoria Crosses that they read out at the end are all true. The fact that the regiment had multiple people named Jones, so they had to attach numbers to that, were true. A lot of those little facts about those fun little facts about the regiment and fun facts about the British Army were true.
There were 11 Victoria Crosses.
11 Victoria Crosses,
That
some
were
Distinguished
awarded.
Service Crosses
Mhm.
awarded. The officers got them. Some of the enlisted got them.
Mhm.
The surgeon.
And we saw those as well. We went to, I think it was at the Imperial War Museum. I cannot remember where, but they had a Victoria Cross exhibit. And some of these, I don't think all of them, some of these were actually a part of the exhibit. At the time, I didn't pay as much attention as I should have. I was paying attention to, I believe it was the SOE ones.
And that's true of the sad state of the British Army after that war, that some of the men had to sell their Victoria Crosses as souvenirs in order to get enough money for food because their pensions either weren't paid out or were paid late. So that part is true. Oh, that wasn't in the movie, but
No, it wasn't in the movie, but it's maybe a codicil that we should add at the end.
Yeah.
This is often something that happens to the war fighters after the society wants to move on. They don't want to be reminded.
Yeah. And
They're like, thank you for doing that. You're missing a leg. I don't want to be reminded. So maybe.
And so the wars were all victories, but they left a lot of broken men.
They did, yeah. And I think that we have gotten much better now, but there's still work to be done.
Yeah.
And part of that is, I think, remembering these things. This is where I think the movie is so important because it brings an event that we do need to remember. This is an important part of history. However, we also need to remember that it left people behind.
Yeah.
And not to make those same mistakes. Then again, I'm a firm believer in Strauss-Howe and generational theory, and things tend to repeat over and over.
Yeah.
So things as they really are.
Things as they really are.
People were brave.
Yes. People
And some of them were treated like crap.
Yeah.
Next week, we are going to discuss yet another war. This time, a book that is absolutely like seminal literature, maybe.
Yes.
For Slavs.
A broad look at the Slav experience at war.
Yes, and that will be the live action Russian version of The Good Soldier Schweik.
Yes.
So, see you next week when we talk about World War I.
What to do